Up first, the week in presidential politics. Behind the headlines, can we stop children born into poverty from becoming impoverished adults?
Hello, I'm Bonnie Urbay. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, the presidential election.
Is Hillary Clinton becoming complacent in the presidential race? Head-to-head polls show Clinton winning comfortably over Donald Trump and taking the U.S. Senate, even House seats, away from Republicans. But some Democrats are concerned this early lead means there's nowhere to go but down in the 3 months till Election Day. She did, however, unveil an economic plan that includes more job creation than any government program in 70 years. And she promised universal pre-kindergarten, tax credits, and subsidized childcare, as well as debt-free college for everyone. Meanwhile, Donald Trump worked hard this week to win back Republican women. Polls show the Republican nominee has dropped by 13% among GOP women since the party conventions. Maine Senator Susan Collins said for the first time she won't vote for Trump, and major GOP donor Meg Whitman declared her support for Hillary Clinton. To court women, Trump also called for a child care deduction as part of his economic plan, criticized by the left as helping only the upper class. In other developments, Mr. Trump said President Obama and Clinton founded and co-founded ISIS. He also said, quote, maybe there is, end quote, a way for Second Amendment people to stop Hillary Clinton from nominating progressive Supreme Court justices. Was that a call for an assassination or a very poor attempt at a joke? The two sides differ. Secretary Clinton has her own new problems, including emails that suggest her State Department aides engaged in what critics are calling pay-for-play opportunities, that for big donors to the Clinton Global Initiative, which the FBI wanted to investigate further, but the Department of Justice said no.
So, Congresswoman, starting with Secretary Clinton, are the Democrats becoming too complacent, or will her emails controversies keep them alert?
Bonnie, Democrats are not in panic the way the Republicans are, but the opposite of panic is not complacency.
Yeah, I don't think that they are complacent at all. I think that they see a huge window of opportunity here, and they are going to dangle every big government program out there for voters to latch onto.
I think they're going to try to do whatever they can to keep the focus on Donald Trump, because the more the media are talking about Donald Trump, the less they're talking about the controversies that are happening on the Democratic side of the aisle.
Well, as a journalist who travels with Hillary Clinton full-time, complacent isn't the word I would use. Last week, we were in 3 cities in Florida. We went to Detroit. We also went to several other states. I wouldn't use complacent as a word.
And yet, when the New York Times blog on politics gives her an 80, right now, of course, not in 85 days or however many days are left till the election, but an 87 to 13% chance for Trump of winning. How can you not become a little complacent, and what are the dangers of complacency?
Well, if I thought she were complacent, I would say you're right. She should be very, that would be terrible for the Democratic Party. But I think that this is a woman who has been around for a long time. She knows that nothing is done until November 9th, and that she will continue to fight, I am quite sure. And I think one of the reasons that she gave sort of this economic speech, which I should say, I mean, I disagree with vehemently on all of her platforms, but it lets her come across as a leader.
Yeah, and you know, she got a big bounce, bigger than Trump, out of the convention. But if you look at past Democrats where there have been bigger bounces, Carter, Dukakis, these people weren't able to keep those bounces, and she's not going to be able to keep them. Yes. At some point, Trump is going to shut his mouth. at least.
Do you think so? You're making history here. That's what you think.
At least long enough to let some of her weaknesses, which are piling up, come out and be discussed.
So two points about the emails. What's really interesting is polling shows that nearly 2/3 of Americans think that she is still not telling the truth about her emails. But roughly the same amount of Americans say they're tired of hearing about the emails. And so that to me says that the emails may not be the best issue to beat her on. The other thing I was going to say is,
but what they keep beating him over the head with, and just started a new series of ads about, is releasing his tax returns. And of course, she released her tax returns on Friday,
Right.
So for 2015. So is that a good issue to keep beating him over the head
I'm
with?
not also entirely sure how many Americans are going to the ballot box and saying he didn't release his tax return, so I can't trust him, so I'm not going to vote for him. I think we've covered some other ground of things that he said that might give them more pause. But about the polling, the national polling that shows her so far ahead on whether or not she's being complacent, coming out of the Democratic National Convention, she went on this bus tour of Ohio and Pennsylvania, and every single week right now they're nearly going back to Ohio. They're going to swing states. They're putting up ads in all these swing states. He has not put up ads at all. I think it's very clear that the Clinton campaign knows that this bounce could not last, and they're putting in the work right now that they're going to need for Election Day.
And it's just also, it is too early to trust the polls. I mean, quite frankly, most Americans are looking at the fact that it's August. They want to enjoy their summer. They want to keep watching the Olympics. They are not ready to focus on or make any decisions about a presidential election that will not happen until November.
Well, okay,
usually
that's conventional wisdom.
no,
but when
it's
Trump
just,
starts calling for the NRA Second Amendment folks to solve the problem
but Bonnie,
of her,
most Americans are still not paying attention.
They're
They
paying
really
attention
are
to that
not.
one.
I think they are, but
no,
I
think
think
the
he
Gold Star
is,
family
they
is
are
actually.
saying
more
such
Partisans.
incredible
Listen, partisans
things
are
and
paying-
historically incredible
You're wrong about
things.
that.
No,
normally
we have high.
these
Let me tell
things-
you what the data are from Pew, because it is true. We have high interest in this election. We have large dissatisfaction. When you push people, in fact, on where they're going to turn out, many people still say they don't know yet. They are disgusted with both.
We're not talking about
and
that.
so what is
We really aren't
important to
talking about
realize
that.
is that many people still
We're
have
really not talking
made
about that.
decisions.
That wasn't the question. What we're talking about are incendiary comments. If you look at these comments, yes, the Muslim parents, the assassination type remarks. These comments not only are covered, but have to be covered. They're covered by Fox. They're covered by CNN, which tends to be more one way or the other. They're covered by MSNBC. They're covered on the national news. You'd be out of your journalistic gut
they're tweeted
not
to
to
death.
cover those. So that's very different from making up your mind. But these way over the top, never before heard kind of remarks.
But a lot
Eleanor,
of
actually,
people
I would
are
say
still tuning them
they are.
out, and that's the important part.
But I would just say that you're both right here. I'm going to come and step in. That I think that one thing is people are tuning it out, and the other thing is that people need new information in order to move their opinion. And one challenge for Hillary Clinton, or for the Republicans, I should say, is that everybody has heard about the email scandal and they're sick of it. And while I think it's a very, very real thing that we should be talking about, it's getting harder and harder to move opinion on it. Every time Donald Trump says something new, it's new information that's moving voters who might be in the middle to think, oh my goodness. And so the Republicans have to find something else other than
the one thing you have to say is that most Americans are at this point where they go,
let's get to something a little more
about a different
subject. To something a little more substantive, which the daycare wars. Okay, they both gave their economic speeches this week. She wants to federal subsidies, and she wants tax enhancements for daycare and family leave. He wants just tax credits, which the consensus from the media on would only help richer or lower middle and upper class people. Both of them were accused of forgetting about the poor on daycare. Is that correct? Who's right?
I think I think that I'm not usually a proponent of Donald Trump, but I think he's closer to the mark on this one than she is. I think what we want for all families is for them to be able to make the choices for their child care arrangements that work best for them. And one of the challenges when government gets into the business of helping subsidize child care is that it biases people towards particular kinds of child care, and it actually encourages people not to use the kind of family arrangements that I think everyone at this table acknowledges, if there's an option, is good. The big problem on the Republican side is that they ignore this very important number from Pew, which is that only 23% of working mothers would choose to work full time if they had to, or if they could. So I think that too often Republicans seem sort of out of touch, but I think that giving people more of their own resources to make the decisions that work for them is the better route if we had.
But in the last segment we just finished discussing, you said even the ones you're most concerned about are the poorest women who can't get, any leave. Well, in terms of child care, they're out of it. Now let's talk about the difference between a deduction and a credit. And if you are middle class, the deduction you take off of your income tax, and that is good. You pay less income tax. If you are worried about the people who don't have child care, then you've got to go to a credit, because that gives you something. And that is what she is trying to do. She's trying not to help me and not to help you. She's trying to help the women who need it most. You can't do that without a credit.
Why was she accused by leftists of not doing enough for poor people?
I'm sorry, on what basis did they say that?
On the daycare.
On what basis did they say that?
I don't know.
They want
just
more of a
saying
credit? Perhaps
they
more
want
of a credit.
it free. They also want free college tuition.
Free.
And,
no,
and they want,
me and all of us
debt-free. Debt-free college is not good enough. Okay, let's talk a little bit about third-party candidates, because we don't have much time left. Gary Johnson or the Green Party candidate.
There are two women running for president.
Are they a real threat to anybody?
They absolutely are if they can make it on the ballot. If you look at polling in some of those swing states we were talking about, Hillary Clinton would be winning by larger margins if they are not allowed to be on the ballot in those states. So some of this will come down to the balloting deadlines in which states they can get on, but they could definitely pull from her numbers.
Most states, actually, both the Green Party and the Libertarian Party have party lines on those ballots, so they should be on many of them.
So are we looking at another Bush-Gore 2000 where it came down to the vote in Florida? And Ralph Nader took 1 or 2% of the vote in Florida,
I think
which would have gone to Gore?
We're looking at a situation where it could essentially be a little bit more like 92 in the sense that the winner doesn't earn a majority of the popular vote, where these two candidates essentially take enough of the vote that the winner is only a plurality popular vote winner, and that
like Clinton,
hurts.
43%.
I must say this. It's not on the ballot or not. It's whether you get in the debates or not.
Yes.
And that you need 15% of the vote. And
well,
Gary
Gary Johnson could well get in.
Even, so
I've seen him getting 10 in some polls, 7%. So he's not quite where he.
But I mean,
who's he pulling from?
He seems to be pulling a lot from. Well, he seems to be pulling a lot from Hillary Clinton, though.
Actually, it's equal.
He's pulling from both of them,
yes.
but it's making a difference for her, because I've seen several polls this week where she would be running about 4 points ahead of Donald Trump in swing states, and this brings her.
But
down
if we want to go
2
back to the 92 reference, which was Bill Clinton's first term, why do we care if it's 43% if she wins the Electoral College? Because he was able to get welfare reform done. He got all kinds of major programs
But if you remember his first 2 years, they were very, very difficult. And quite frankly, what this has to do with is the notion of a governing mandate. It would also be quite a change of heart for Democrats to all of a sudden come out and say they like the Electoral College when they have been casting aspersions toward it since 2000. So you would see quite the, idea reversal here. But there is really more the issue of, would she be able to essentially govern? Barack Obama won a majority of the popular vote in 2008. It was part of the reason why he actually had a higher approval rating among Republicans on the day of his inaugural than Bill Clinton did among Republicans on the day of his, or George Bush had among Democrats on the day of his.
One last question. If Trump loses, is he going to claim it was rigged and try to start a revolution with Second Amendment people.
I think he said he was going to go on a vacation. The problem, of course, is that there's a lot of Americans who are hurting and who would benefit from more limited government policies that are going to now have to wait another 4 years.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Trump, Trump is setting up the scenario to lose now, and everything you hear really plays into that. And the rigged election, when elections are conducted in 50 states, is the most bogus of all.
All right, let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie Bay or at To the Contrary. Behind the headlines, growing up in the other America, research shows it's incredibly hard for disadvantaged children, especially African Americans, to move into the middle class. But a group of researchers were surprised to find one common theme among young people who did move ahead.
One of the most enduring promises of the American dream is that anyone can succeed. But research shows another story. Kids born to lower-income households struggle mightily to enter the middle class.
In the 1990s, our public housing projects in America had become, in many cities, toxic, dangerous places to live. At that time, there was some research that had begun to show that concentrated poverty in neighborhoods was bad for life chances of families and children. So a lot of this combined into a conversation about what do we do, with the inner city and with some of these neighborhoods.
Part of the federal government's response was the Moving to Opportunity program, which DeLuca has studied for 13 years.
We set out to understand what had happened to families who were part of the Moving to Opportunity experiment, which focused on, in Baltimore, about 600 families, a third of which got a chance to move out of the project into lower poverty communities.
The results of Moving to Opportunity were mixed. While leaving bad neighborhoods has advantages, many kids were still hindered by other factors, such as racism or lack of family support. Still, there were success stories.
Over the course of the research, we started to follow the young adults as they were launching into independence. We started to notice some of these kids are really resilient.
But what made the difference? DeLuca says they found 94% of young people who had an identity project had jobs or were going to college.
We didn't know we were going to learn about identity projects when we started. They're activities that provide an escape from the difficulty of daily life challenges, which many young people in our study had, but also provided a way to define what you were and were not. What you are about and what you're definitely not about. That distinction, in some cases, is life-saving.
One person who found her identity project is Brittany Fuston, who developed a passion for dancing.
I was so committed to dancing. Like every day I came home from school, I would work out and dance and just practice everything that I learned to be better. It kept me from going down the wrong paths and out of being in a lot of trouble that most people would get into if they didn't have any activities, or if they didn't have anything that had with a passion to keep them from being sucked into the lives of being in the city and the troubles that you get into.
Brittany went to a special school for the arts, then entered the Army and went to school to become a medical assistant. Today, she has 2 children and lives with her children's father, who she says is also motivated to make a better life for their family. Brittany is planning to go back to school to become a nurse. But Brittany has had her struggles too. She grew up around people who did drugs or committed violence. She even saw people die in front of her.
Just living in it all the time, you just kind of look at it like, oh, because you're just so used to it. So I didn't want my kids around, though, to grow up around all the violence and the drugs.
As hard as you work to move forward, that you still have close ties to people who are struggling. And that doesn't just go away. Grit is not enough. Right, so these young adults have gotten to the starting gate against the odds, but not all of them can finish the race, and that's where we have to step in, and we can definitely do better by them.
DeLuca says intergenerational poverty doesn't have to be inevitable, but support should go beyond preschool.
We don't know what flipped the switch. We couldn't, all of the young people in our study shared very disadvantaged origins. And we looked to see whether there was any pattern in those who found an identity project. A lot of policy attention is focused on very young children right in the early years, right? But we can't abandon our young adults instead of saying, well, after age 5, there's nothing we can do. I mean, we find that nothing could be further than the truth from that.
So since the anti-poverty movement began really back in the 1960s, we have spent more than $20 billion, way more, on anti-poverty programs, and yet the poverty rate is higher now today. Why is this going on in the land of opportunity?
I mean, I think a huge issue here that we didn't talk about in the beginning here is education and letting people have the choices to go to schools and to better themselves. And I think when you give people those opportunities, they find them and they will flourish.
So you think charter schools is the answer?
Not really. I don't think just charter schools. Actually, I think charter schools have their drawbacks, but I think true educational freedom. When there are families that have a daughter like this who are saying she doesn't want to fall into the cycle of crime and violence, she has aspirations and she has talents, let's find her another opportunity, and they did. There's many more families out there like that.
I couldn't agree with you more about education. Because if you look at what has happened to Americans from the beginning, as each generation did better, education has been the key to it. We're at a point now where that's not the issue it was a generation or two ago. What's interesting about this project is this notion of a passion or an identity project. Just think about it. That's what middle-class kids get from the beginning.
Lessons,
Johnny,
private music lessons, dance
not at all.
lessons.
Johnny, what do you want to be when you grow up? You focus the kid on the future from the beginning. So if they're not getting that, if they're not getting that focus on the future, then this notion and the figures are amazing. 90% of those who had a, quote, identity project, it didn't matter what it was. It may not have been an educational project. It may have been fixing cars. But he focused on something that seemed seemed to be a road to the future. This is an incredible breakthrough as far as I'm concerned. Now, at the same time, they say these kids still need help. They need help beyond Head Start,
right.
and they need help after this. We know that after Head Start, they get into the public school system, and for some reason, you know, it's all gone. All of that elevation that they had. So this is why these projects, I don't even think this was a government-sponsored project, are so important to tell us what is the key that we just didn't know before.
And yet there was a study out this week that showed that neighborhoods and African Americans, impoverished African Americans, are more confined in neighborhoods that are all poor African American people than white people. White impoverished people or move into middle and upper class, even sometimes areas. So is more emphasis on building low and middle, requiring developers to build low and middle income housing in upper class or upper middle class areas.
It's kind of hard to, the requirement part is a little bit hard to do there. But I do think it tells you something when she's saying that, you know, this is just how kids grow up. You know, that they grow up, she doesn't want your kids to grow up feeling like scared of their neighborhood, having to worry about things like that. And I think that that's a big part of this issue, is that the neighborhoods that they're in, that the schools that they're going to, and it's like it's a cycle, as they were saying, is you grow up in one area and then you stay there, and then the next generation grows up there too. So I think we have to be looking at that problem as well.
I mean, there's a couple parts of this that I think are important. One is that the idea that the American dream is actually a one-generation reality is not usually true. In fact, it's typically a three-generation project, where essentially the generation, you know, that is very poor and very uneducated usually invests in and helps the next generation to get a little bit more education and to get a little bit further down the road. And then it's really those children's children who actually make it.
So are you saying immigration is what's, because
but what
80%,
I'm saying is
it's a question I
know.
wanted to ask. 80% of the people who immigrate to America are totally impoverished and don't have a high school education. So when we're importing poverty, as we do through our immigration policy, while fighting poverty at
And
the
yet,
same time,
wait,
is it counterproductive?
No, because one of the things that is true is that the people who leave their countries to come here are profoundly committed, if you will. They all have an identity project before they arrive to get themselves into a better place and a better position. They've already taken the risks and basically done the work that it's going to be to do whatever it is to succeed. So I think you do have to realize that the American dream is a little bit more constraining than people think it is, in the sense that it takes a lot longer. But
why hasn't that third generation thing worked for African
Because I'll tell you, the other
who've been
piece,
here for 20 generations?
No, but the other piece that it frustrates me as a college professor, as somebody who has seen this time and again, those students who come to universities who don't have necessarily the advantages of middle class or wealthier classes also don't get to have some of the advantages of those students in college. For instance, political internships. I cannot tell you how often I am frustrated by the notion that our students who have the ability to essentially succeed in politics can't, because they don't have the financial resources to work for free for a period of time in order to essentially get offered a job.
Very quickly,
I was just
10
going to say
seconds.
that 10 seconds, gosh, that was something that I really struggled with when I was in college. I couldn't do those free internships, so then you don't have that experience line on your resume, which makes it very hard to get a job. So I'm very pro organizations that pay for internships like that for kids.
Which is most nonprofits these days. Yeah. That's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/to the contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.